Well, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here today. Good job getting out of bed today. I know it's difficult, but I'm glad you're here. Let me give you one quick little update, just as our church. How many of you have ever tried to build something like a house or a company building or anything? Anybody ever tried to do that? Yep, me too. And so I just want to give you a little update on where we are with our simple project, which is what we're doing in a complete workover into immersive environments in our children's ministries at both campuses. So it has taken much longer than any of us wanted, and that's the truth. It's just taken a long time. But we're finally to a place to where we basically have contracts on both campuses, and we are about ready to start. And so I just want to give you a quick update of where we are and that we are still moving forward. But if you've ever tried to build anything, well, welcome to our world, and now we're in your world. And the buildings that you sit in right now at your campus, we experienced all this same stuff as we go along. So we have hopes and dreams of things we're trying to do, but sometimes circumstances outside of our control end up slowing things down. And so that's just been the truth with this as well. But we're still moving forward, and I just wanted you to know nobody's forgotten. We have been hard at work at this, and we should be seeing some movement very, very soon. So I wanted you to know that. Well, I'm glad you're here today. And Liberty Hill, I'm glad to have you along today as well. And those of you who are going to watch this later, I'm glad to have you along, because today we're going to talk about one of my all-time favorite topics. And let me just tell you, there's a little disclaimer. I can get really excited when I talk about this, right? In fact, I can get a little worked up when I talk about this. It is just, I'm so passionate about this topic, and I'll just tell you, I get excited when we talk about the church. And so let me just start with a question today, and I want to ask you to be honest. Church is a place where you can be, or you at least should be able to be honest. And so I just want to ask you to be honest when I ask you this maybe very difficult question to start. So let me just ask, how many of you text while you drive? Let's just be honest, right? You text while you drive. All right, lift them up, all right? So look, all the people who are not raising their hands right now probably either have a spouse or a teenager sitting next to them that they've told, don't you dare text while you drive, right? Kind of like telling your young driver, don't speed, but yet you've got a radar detector in your car. It's a little messed up, I get it, right? So let me just say this. See, look, I'm not comfortable. I am not comfortable with you texting while you drive. And clearly, there are a lot of you who are textually active. And I know that you're going, Shane, I practice safe text. I get it. But I'm not comfortable with you texting and driving. Now, I can text and drive. And isn't that the way we kind of feel? Like, I can text and drive because I'm actually good at it, right? Like maybe you have your system. What do you do to be able to text and drive? Like maybe you're using knees to navigate that so you can use both hands and drive. I don't know what your system is, right? Now, look, I've gotten behind people who are obviously texting, and I pray for them, sometimes out loud. Sometimes I get up beside them and I pray really out loud right to them, right? So like I used to drive this little red Jeep, this little two-door Jeep, and one summer day I was on my way home, and I get a text. And isn't it funny how you're just completely normal until that phone buzzes or beeps, right? Or your watch goes off, and all of a sudden you're in a panic, like somehow the world is not going to be right until you look at that text and respond to that text. In fact, isn't it true? You can get a text, and the people you were in front of, just like whatever conversation you're in, all of a sudden it just disappears, and they're gone, and you're like, I got to look at that, right? And I'm ripping out my phone, and it's like, y'all just went away. This is like the world is depending on this, right? So I got a text. And I looked up as I was texting back, and I'm like 3 feet from the line of cars that have stopped in front of me on my way home this day. And I grabbed the wheel and yanked it, forgetting that I was holding my phone. And my phone, because it was a summer day, I had the doors off the Jeep. My phone flies out of the Jeep somewhere. And I went off into the dirt on the right side, dirt flying around everywhere, dust everywhere. And I ended up sitting next to the guy 3 cars up from the back of the line. And when all the dust settled and we were just looking at each other, I think he was praying for me too. Because look, if I hadn't looked up, I could have caused some major damage to my car and to myself, and quite honestly, to a lot of other people. All because I took my eyes off of where I was going. So we know this is true. When we take our eyes off of where we're going, we can do a lot of damage. And look, all of that is a texting story, but it's so easy. It's just so easy to do the same thing with church. It's so easy to get things messed up and find ourselves in a bad situation, even with church, because we're not paying attention to where we're going. And what's so crazy? Here's what's so crazy, right? Jesus was so clear about where we should be heading as a church. He gave us directions and marching orders that literally came from his lips. And here's what Jesus said. He said, go into all the world and make disciples, baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and then teach them to observe or to do or to live out all the things that I taught you. And if those directions are so crystal clear, why do we get so distracted doing something else? And so today I want to talk about what happens and how easy it is for us as a church, and maybe as individual Jesus followers as well, to end up in the dust on the side of the road. And then I want you to know that before we go today, I want to spend just the last moments we have together today to talk to you as our church family about where we're going and what we need to keep our attention on as it relates to today. In fact, I've put together an email. It's already all written. It's already all set up. It is ready to send to you this afternoon. And it's going to those of you who are clearly invested and with a whole lot more details of about what we're talking about today. So what distracts us from that? The first thing that distracts us is this. Why do we get distracted? It's because churches get insider focused. What we do is we take our eyes off of what Jesus called us to do, and when we do, we quickly can turn inward and begin to cause damage, even unknowingly. But the problem is when you turn inside, or when we turn inside, then all of a sudden, all of this has become about us. How does that happen? Well, there's a few ways that happens. First of all, insider churches stop taking risk. By its very nature, everything about a church is risky. At every turn, there are new risks to take. Somewhere along the way, and here's what happens, somewhere along the way, when a measure of stability in a church begins to get reached, like, oh, now we have a building, and oh, now we can do this, and oh, now we can do this. What happens is churches, just like us, stop taking risk. And the reason we do is because all of a sudden we think in our heads somehow that we're going to, when we stop taking risk, one of the ways we do that is we start taking care of, let me just use these words, key stakeholders, insiders, people who are already here. And here's the deal. It's a lot easier and it's a lot less risky to keep church people happy than it is to continue to reach out to people who are far from God. It's just easier. It's more comfortable. But from the very beginning of our church, we dreamed of a place where we risk it by accepting, unconditionally accepting, and putting the future of this church in the hands of some really messed up people. In fact, right now, even if you don't know them, even if you don't know them, I want you to turn to the person next to you and I want you to look at them. I want you to say, dude, you're really messed up, right? Just tell them right now. You don't even have to know them, right? Look, do you know why we would risk putting the future of this church in the hands of really messed up people? Because really messed up people fit with the rest of us, because we're all a little messed up. Look, we want a church that will, from the very beginning, we wanted a church that would draw big crowds of messed up people. You say, well, wait, why does it have to be big? Because everywhere Jesus went, he drew big crowds of messed up people. He had so much impact and he helped so many people that he drew a crowd. People couldn't stay away because of what happened inside of them when they were around him and what he did in their life. People say, oh, well, I don't like big churches. I just want my little church where I know everyone and I can have my own place. It's like, wait. If you don't like big churches, can I just tell you, you're going to hate heaven. It's just going to be a big crowd of formerly messed up people worshiping Jesus. Now, come on. Why is it okay to pack out performing arts centers at school? Why is it okay to pack out gymnasiums and stadiums and arenas for ball games? Listen, God's church should be packed out every weekend because church people refuse to be insider focused. When I was 18 years old, God used a security guard at my college in the LA area and an article in the LA Times to reshape my thinking about church. Because I had grown up thinking about church just one way. But God used like some odd circumstances to reboot my brain about what church should be and could be, and then called me to start a church for people who didn't like church. And I'll just tell you, I didn't know what that looked like because I'd never seen it. I didn't grow up that way. But there was one thing that was super clear to me, is that whatever we did, we had to reach out to people who didn't want anything to do with church. Because they didn't know God or they had been hurt by that kind of church that I grew up in, or by religious people or neighbors that they lived by. And so many of you know the story. On Easter of 2002, we had our very first service. 253 people showed up. I only knew about 75 of them. And do you know what? We sat there in Leander Middle School cafeteria, and we were all messed up. Look, no matter what we do, we cannot move away from our vision of helping people heal from life's hurts. And do you know why? It's not because Shane came up with a clever saying. It's because Jesus did. And Jesus said in Matthew, I didn't come for those who've got it all together. I came for the broken. I didn't come for the healthy. I came for the sick. This is why our mission is what it is. This is why we do what we do. It is foundational that we keep risking whatever it takes, and that we dream that vision, and that we organize around that vision, and that we finance that vision, and follow Jesus' directive to go and show our neighbors and our coworkers and our school teachers and those who service in stores that we go to, that we show them who Jesus is by how we love them and make a difference in their life because of Jesus in our life. And to do that, I'm telling you, not only as a church, but as an individual follower of Jesus, we have to take risk. Another reason that we become an insider church is we end up staying married to old methods. Look, if we don't have a well of new ideas that we can go to and implement at any given time, we're probably spending a lot of energy propping up old methods and programs. And let me just tell you, those old methods and programs bring a certain level of comfort to me as a pastor, and here's why. Old methods and programs keep people who are already in the church happy, because you came because that worked for you. We're comfortable. This is how we do it. I like this. But remember, every single idea has an expiration date and a shelf life. And if our church isn't constantly evaluating and strategically stopping old things and starting new things, then we are probably moving toward or have already become an insider-focused church. So can I just tell you how to keep an eye on this? Here's how we do that, right? We are going to date the method, but we're going to marry the mission. We're going to date the methods we use, but we're going to marry and make a commitment to the mission. People say, well, that's not the way to do church. It's always been done like this. I don't like that. And typically it's religious church people saying that. That's not what church is. We aren't married to a method. Let me explain to you this way. We aren't baking an apple pie church. Let me say it that way. We are not baking an apple pie church. If you want an apple pie church, that's fine. They're everywhere. Christians love apple pie church. Apple pie will do. It will suffice. It can work. We are not an apple pie church. In fact, it's why oftentimes Christian people come from another church and they come in and then they taste, it looks like a pie, so then they taste it and they're like, well, that tastes different. There's something different about that. We aren't an apple pie church. We are baking a slap your mama buttermilk pie kind of church. And those are not the same. And look, can I just tell you, buttermilk pie church doesn't taste good to insider-focused, crusty church people. We want people to follow Jesus. We want people to meet Jesus, not just show up and check a box on a Sunday morning. Not just to make sure we do it right. And the only way, look, after all these years, the only way I know how to do that is just love other people enough to get them in an environment or around some Jesus followers where they can be introduced to Jesus and his love for them and his help for them. So we're going to date our methods and we're going to be married to our mission. And then kind of the final reason why people become inside focused churches is have a lack of vision. Clear vision is the single greatest promoter for movement and action, really anywhere, but certainly in the church. And when vision is fuzzy, things slow down and naturally drifts towards becoming insider focused. And let's face it, we all wake up every single day thinking about ourselves. It's just the truth. And it comes natural to us to do that. That's why so much of what we teach is countercultural and it's against what's natural to us. That's why both Jesus and the Apostle Paul painted a very clear vision of following Jesus as living an others first lifestyle. And if we aren't sure where we're going, chances are we're moving towards becoming an insider-focused church. So look, for the past 20 plus years, we've been imagining something completely different than apple pie church. And so today, I want to share with you what I imagine our church could be and what our church could do as we dream and imagine church. First of all, imagine a church, get this, of new traditions. Why would new traditions be important to a church? Here's why. John, one of Jesus' disciples, recounts a story in his Gospel of John. And here's what he says. He tells us this. The next day, Jesus decided to leave Galilee. And look, finding Philip, right? He found Philip. Jesus found Philip and he said to Philip, follow me. Which, by the way, let me just point out, side note, if you call yourself a follower of Jesus, don't ever forget that Jesus found you. You didn't find him. And then he said two words to you, follow me. He met you somewhere and said, follow me. And so Jesus found Philip, and then I want you to see what happened. Philip, like Andrew and Peter, two of the other disciples, Philip was from the town of Bethsaida. And then Jesus found Philip, and then look what happened. Philip found Nathanael. He didn't say, oh, Jesus, could we just get together and sing some songs that make us feel really warm and gooey on the inside? And Jesus, when we do that, could you make sure nobody sits in my seat, right? He didn't say, let's get in a room and study theology so we can all know lots of information and stuff so we can win fights on social media. He didn't do that. Philip said, you know what Philip said after Jesus found him and said, follow me? You know what he said? He said, I got to tell someone. This has changed my life. And so he found Nathanael. And look at what happened when Philip found Nathanael. He found him and told him, we have found the one Moses wrote about in the law. We've heard about this our whole lives. We found him. And we read about how the prophets wrote about this Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And look at what Nathanael says. He goes, Nazareth? Can anything, he's so cynical. Can anything good come out of there? Can anything good come from Nazareth? Like, seriously, really? You found the Messiah and he's from Nazareth, that nasty old place? Nothing good comes from here. It's kind of like UT fans saying, Oklahoma, really? I'm joking, but seriously, right? It's like, and look at what Philip told Nathanael. He goes, you don't believe me? Look at what he said. Come and see. And don't miss this. Nathanael was caught up in the traditional mindset of thinking that nothing good can come from Nazareth. We don't do it that way. That's not what it was talking about. And that traditional thinking almost caused him to miss Jesus. Look, my heart breaks over this, and I so don't want us to be this, but there are churches and then people that do what I do all over the place that are so caught up in the tradition of, oh, church has to be this way, that they're causing thousands of people around them who would never come to that old method church to miss Jesus, the one who gave his life for them. And here's what breaks my heart. Who would have ever thought that the church that Jesus died for would often be the barrier for the very ones that Jesus died for? Well, I just want a church where I can go up and talk to the pastor. I want to know the pastor. I just want a church where I have a bunch of Christian friends to hang around all the time. You know what the problem with that is? Is there are a lot of church people who know a pastor, but they only ever invite their church friends over. But the person next door that doesn't know Jesus wouldn't even be caught dead in their church, and they've never been invited over with all the church friends. That's a problem. In fact, you may not even know their name. So many people don't even know their name. And it's so easy to end up spending all your time with the 99 and look up one day and realize you have forgotten the one that Jesus told you to focus on, who is missing and hurting and broken. And while I'm on my little soapbox today, we have people come and say, hey, pastor, I'm shopping for a new church, looking for a new church. Whew. I'll just tell you what I think every time somebody tells me that. And look, I think there's some really good, well-meaning people, and but here's what goes through my head, right? That is code language to me for I'm mad at my last church or something they did, and I'm looking for a new one that better meets my needs, wants, and desires. And hang on, listen close. Please hear what I'm about to say, and then let me explain it. Here's what I need to say about that. Get the hell out of this church. Now, before you choke on your coffee, let me explain to you what I mean by that. Hell on earth is when life is about you. The church is supposed to be all about my needs and wants and desires. And if that's true for you, then guess what you just brought into the church? You brought hell, because hell on earth is life that's all about you. And quite honestly, that's also hell for everyone else around you, and eventually it will be hell for you when there is no one left around you because it was all about you. And if you've got that hell inside of you, you really kind of have two choices in our church. You can either go to work and get that hell out of you, that insider-focused hell out of you, or you can get the hell out of this church, but one way or the other, the hell has to go, or we'll be an insider-focused church. You say, Shane, are you mad about this? That seems like strong and bold language. Strong and bold. Let me see. Strong and bold. Yes and yes. I mean, our language should be strong and our words should be bold. And do you know why? Here's why I think, is because God didn't call me to be like a scared pansy pastor. And it doesn't mean that sometimes I don't get up here and I'm scared to say some of the things I say. But God didn't call me to that, and he didn't call us to be a weak church who won't be authentic and tell things how they are. I mean, can you imagine a church that's not held back by the this is the way we've always done it attitude? A church that is not held back from this is about me and my place and what I get and the catering to me. We've always got to be ready to change any method if it helps us reach people far from God. Look, the only thing in this church that's never going to change is that we've got to go and we've got to make disciples and we've got to baptize them and we've got to teach them. Everything else is pretty optional. I mean, imagine that. So as we imagine church, think about this, not just new traditions, but imagine a church of literal full of people with changed lives. And back to John, take a look at John in our story. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said to him, "Here truly is an Israelite whom there is no deceit." This is like a really good dude, is what he was saying. And Nathanael's like, "How do you know me?" And Jesus said, "Well, I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." And look at this. Then Nathanael declared, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel. Do you see how quickly Nathanael changed from like that? There's no way that could be him to like, oh my gosh, you are the Son of God. This was the guy who was saying, can anything good come from Nazareth? And then within minutes, he's saying, I believe this is the Son of God. Can I tell you, here's the deal. We have got to foster environments where people far from God can get in the presence of Jesus and Jesus' followers. And I am just absolutely convinced that if we can get people where Jesus is, he will change their life. I mean, isn't that the story that many of you have? I mean, you came in skeptical, expecting it to be apple pie church as usual. After almost 23 years as pastor of this church, there are some stories that just stand out to me, and there's one specific story, I just will never forget it, and it happened on the second week of this church. Second week we were alive. It was the second week after Easter, and I was out on the front patio of Leander Middle School where we launched, and I'll just never forget it. It's so clear in my mind. I was standing there and I was looking out, and here comes a guy with this is how much I remember, a white cotton button-down shirt, khaki shorts, and sandals. And he comes around the corner of the school way down there. And he is pulling a lady and two little girls along with him. And I say pulling because I found out later, they did not want to come. Their life had been to hell and back. And there was no way that there was something in a church that was meeting in a school was going to help that. And he drug them around the corner from the little trailer where they lived across the street from the school. And they walked in. And something in the music moved them. The message challenged them. And they came back. And in just a few months, she gave her life to Jesus and started following Jesus. And she got baptized. And everything didn't go perfect, but it started to change. And I'll tell you today, no one in the history of this church so far has helped more people through missions and leading mission trips all around the world for our entire church than this lady. Only Jesus can change from someone being drug around the corner who doesn't want to be there to leading literally hundreds of people around the world to share who Jesus loves and what his love is like around the world. And can I just tell you, there are people just like her out there in your city all the time. They live next to you. They work in the stores that you go to. They work down the hall from you. They sit on the same bleachers as you watch your kids. They're everywhere. In fact, you know all that traffic that you're mad about? That's them. But you got to walk across the street. You got to invite them over to get to know their name and who they are. You got to go sit with them on the patio and out and talk in the front yard. You've got to invite them once you get to know them to come to church with you. You've got to assume, let me say it this way. You've got to start to assume responsibility for that empty chair beside you instead of being glad you got some extra room on Sunday. Because I'm convinced that if we can get them where Jesus is and around Jesus' followers who love them like you, their life will change. And that's what must drive us to do something new. Because you change a community one life at a time and you build a church one person at a time. Finally, if we're imagining a church, it's a church of changed perspectives. Look what happened with Nathanael. Jesus says to Nathanael, so wait a minute, you didn't believe in me, you were cussing where I came from, but now you believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree? If that's all it took, Nathanael, look, you're gonna see greater things than that. Like, you think that was good? Just wait to see what I got for you. You think the music was good the first Sunday you walked in or got drug in? You think that message challenged you a little bit the first time? Jesus is saying, just wait. And he says to Nathanael, you wait, see what I got for you. And the next thing that happens in the story, Jesus changes water into wine, and Nathanael's like, oh, well, that's cool. And then he watched Jesus feed 5,000 people. He saw Jesus walk on the water. He saw Jesus heal people and do incredible miracles. And then he saw Jesus crucified. and saw Jesus risen from the dead afterwards. And Jesus went back to heaven. And then Nathanael saw his buddy Peter stand up and preach. And 3,000 people at once decide to follow Jesus. And Nathanael's mind was blown, because he came in contact with Jesus. I mean, can you imagine a church where our minds are constantly blown because we just keep seeing more and more people follow Jesus? In 1990, Mitsubishi brought that car out. Looks old today, right? Because it's like 35 years old now. But that car, it was a brand new car. It came out. It's called the Eclipse, the turbo version. In fact, I saw that car come out in 1990. Julie and I just moved to Amarillo, first ministry job, and I looked at her and I said, I want that. So we went and we found one. It was a 1990 turbo, 5-speed, black, tan leather. Ooh, baby, was it a sweet car. And one day I was visiting my parents. They were living in Andrews at the time, and I thought, I have this incredible car. And all I've ever really done is just drive it. I love driving it, but all I've ever really done, but it is made to tear the wheels off. But I'm just driving it around. And so what I did is I took it out on Taylor Road outside of Andrews, which is a 7-mile, absolutely straight, flat, paved road right through the middle of the West Texas oil field. And I sat at the end of that road, did it on a Sunday, knew there wouldn't be anybody out there. And I revved up that engine. And man, I smoked those tires and I let it go. And I was hanging on like a middle school girl screaming as I was going. And when I hit third gear and that turbo kicked in, it put my head up against the headrest and my back sank into the seat and my face pulled back like I'd had bad plastic surgery. And when I hit 120, I still had fifth gear to go. And I stomped on it. And I tore up that 7 miles in just over 3 minutes. RockPointe Church, please hear me. It is time for us to either stomp on it as a church and tear the wheels off, or it's time for us to park the car in the garage and never get it out again. Because Jesus didn't die for a church that is keeping people out because we have some hang up about the way things should be done. Jesus didn't die for a church that repels people and people resist the church because of the way the church people act towards them. It's time that we count the cost and that we pay whatever the price to be a church whose leader is Jesus, whose turbo power is the Holy Spirit, and whose focus is Jesus' great command. And that should be what our church is like. And it's time we either stomp on it or we get out of the driver's seat. We have a mission and a vision, and I'm telling you, as long as my heart is beating, I'm not stopping. I mean, how could I? People are hurting. People need Jesus, and I'm refusing as an individual, and I'm asking you to stand with me, but I'm refusing to be an individual who stands in the way or tries to make someone comfortable who won't change to reach more people for Jesus. Listen, I'm praying. Look, I'm praying, right? I prayed a lot leading up to today. I am praying that I am praying that we will stomp on it. I'm praying for you that you'll start stomping on it in your neighborhood. I'm praying that you will stomp on it in your job, in your city, and that you'll get serious about filling the empty chair next to you. And not let hell into our church by making it all about us. RockPointe Church, listen, it is time to stomp on it. Back in 2015, I sat in my front yard and my heart just hurt. It just hurt because I felt immense sadness about what I was seeing about to happen in churches. This was the week that the Supreme Court legalized same-sex marriage. And I sat in my front yard and I was so sad thinking about what people who do what I do were going to stand up and say in pulpits and stages all across the nation. That was literally going to drive a wedge between the church and many of the ones that Jesus died for. And I sat there at my house, sad, not knowing what to do. And all of a sudden, I started writing something down because it just started coming to me. And this is what God gave me that day. Listen. Imagine a church that just loves others. A church where it's okay to not be okay. A church that is for all people, letting everyone in, not to condemn them, but to love them. A church that doesn't exist to change others or tell them how wrong they are, but instead seeks transformation within ourselves. Transformation that leads to personal repentance for the ways we have failed to show mercy. To ask for forgiveness for all of the finger pointing, all of the raised eyebrows, and all of the "I can't believe they" thoughts. To act like Jesus sets us free, not like we're called to cast the first stone. To humbly admit our fear and our selfishness and our anger. To work and to grow and to change and to heal. I can't change you. I'm not going to try. I can't change our church by myself. But if we were to all embrace Jesus' marching orders, Jesus can. Imagine that. I know I'm a little long, but I want to talk to you for one brief second. Over the history of our church, when I pull a little stool out, I call it stool time. Take that however you want. So let's have a little stool time. I was thinking, because there's something I've said out loud multiple times, but kind of always behind the scenes to our staff and some leaders and other things. And I just thought, based on the message today, that maybe I ought to just say this to you too. And so I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, what if everybody in our church, you, me, what if all of us? What if everybody in our church was living, giving, and serving the way that you do? I mean, stop and think about that. Don't think about anybody else. Think about you. What if everyone in our church lived out Jesus' command to love others the way he loved us? What if everybody was doing that the way you do that? What if everybody was knowing their neighbor and helping their neighbor follow Jesus the same way you are? What if everyone was living the same way as you? Everyone in our church. And what if everyone was giving in our church like you give? What if everyone had the same financial plan to contribute to our church that you do? What if everybody just did it like you? I mean, clearly you think there's something right about what you're doing. I think there's something right about what I'm doing. And so let's just be honest about the question. What if everybody was living and what if everybody was giving the same way that you are? And then what if everyone was serving everyone else in the church? And quite honestly, what if we were serving out in our community and helping out in our community, in the church and community, because it's a both thing. What if everybody was serving the same way as you? So the question is what if everyone was living, giving, and serving just like you? I got a question I want you to take with you today. If everyone was living, giving, and serving just like you, here's my question. Would this be a church you would want to come to? Would this be a church that just grabs you? Or would this look a whole lot like apple pie, where we check off boxes and go about our week, but we don't live and we don't give and we don't serve like Jesus followers? We do it like religious church people, often called Christians. So the question is, would this be a church you want to come to? Every time I think about that, and I'm not thinking about you. This is a Shane question. This is not this. This is a Shane question. I am so challenged. I am so challenged to make some changes in how I'm living and how I'm giving and how I'm serving. And all I'm asking you to do today, all I'm asking you to do for those of you who get my email later on today, is to consider, would this be a church that you would want to come to? Would this be a church that you would feel comfortable bringing your neighbor to? Because you know everybody is living and giving and serving just like you. Hard question, isn't it? Tough to take. Hard pill to swallow if you don't do this. But if you'll look in the mirror and ask yourself the question, that's my question for you. Imagine a church where everybody is doing things, living, giving, and serving, just like you. Is that a church you'd want to be a part of? We need God's help with that, don't we? Let me pray for us. Father, thank you that you never give up on us. And God, when things are going great, you're there. When things are tough, you're there. But God, help us never to miss the fact of how much you love us. But God, also you called us to something. And it's so easy to just relax in that love and become insider focused and forget that there's a mission attached to this. And so, Father, for wherever this hit each of us today, would you please do something inside of us that triggers something inside of us to be more like you in the way we live and we give and we serve. Challenge us in that and help us to rise to what you're calling us as individuals to. And God, when we do, this church changes. And I think that's what we all want. So help us to honor you by how we live and how we give and how we serve. And we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.